I'm very sympathetic towards that argument, and that's what I was talking about when I was giving these litanies of opium sales and I mean everything else that they have their finger in. Once they have a nuclear deterrent, they may get worse in all of those areas. And so there is an argument to be made that in the long run, this could be absolutely horrific. Now, I don't think that it would be more horrific than a war right now, which would be absolutely devastating. But my argument, my response to that would be that I think that there are signs of North Korea weakening internally. There are a lot of signs over the last decade of the penetration of North Korea by Western culture, Western values, market forces. Although I mean, the graveyards are littered with people who have predicted the collapse of North Korea in the next 2 weeks. The reality is, I think that there are signs that change is coming. Now, it may not be immediately. It's probably not going to be immediate because there's no other opposition to the Kim family. But I think over the long run, it will happen. And so I think we are better off living with them for however long that takes, even knowing that they're going to expand their opium sales and their smuggling and their sales of biological and chemical weapons, because reckoning is coming.
Back there?
My question is about the United States, which is, are we too isolated and protected? Like, I feel like obviously 9/11 happened, it was terrible, but like you sort of went crazy for a little bit, and then you have the possibility of maybe a nuclear weapon could reach us. But lots of countries have been under that threat for a much longer period of time, and now we're like, well, maybe we don't need South Korea and Japan to exist anymore. I mean, that feels like a psychological thing about the United States as a country.
I think you're right. And the amazing thing is, if you travel Seoul right now, they don't really care. I mean, not that they don't care, right? But they go on with their daily existence. I was in Seoul. I mean, Seoul is half an hour from the border, and there's farmers markets downtown, and there was a kids concert, and they weren't fazed. And meanwhile, in the United States, it's this huge panic. Now, during the Cold War, we were targeted by, the Soviets could have taken out the United States in the same way. So I think it is an overreaction, and I think to some extent we lose credibility with lots of our allies in the world when they say, we've been living with this threat for a long, long time, and you're not going to win us over by saying now the threat is so immediate, we have to launch this first strike and live with the consequences.
Well, and the other thing is that if you look at it and you look at our response to 9/11, for instance, I don't know if we saw a show of hands, who in the audience feels more safe or about the same after invading Iraq under the pretense of WMD and spending more than 4,000 American lives and $4.75 trillion. I don't know how many people would feel more safe. John Mueller at Ohio State wrote a book called Blowback recently, or shortly after the 9/11 events, that said that we are completely out of our mind in the way we reacted to it. And we're still in Afghanistan 16 years later.
That's right.
And I'll tell you what, I think that if we left tomorrow, or if we left 5 years from now, the Taliban would run the country a year after we left. And I don't think that is anything that is terrible for the United States. We're still spending lives, and recently sent 4,000 more troops into Afghanistan. For what purpose? We're also spending, just since I'm on a roll here, $12 billion a year in Afghanistan in these wars. $5 billion of it to pay all of the personnel costs, all of the payroll for the Afghan army. So when we talk about these responses to things, we live in fear, and one of the reasons we live in fear is that the military-industrial congressional complex needs an enemy. One of the biggest problems for the Pentagon with the fall of the Soviet Union was that now we had a problem because we don't have an enemy. We have a $700 billion defense budget that is larger than the next 10 to 14 countries in the world combined. So if we don't have an enemy and we don't have fear, the Defense Department and many other elements of our government are immobilized and irrelevant. So fear is a critical element of the United States culture.
It's like the mouse that roared.
Well, a variation of it.
Yeah, and I'll jump ahead maybe to something I assume is on your list, and that's Iran, right? And decertifying the Iranian nuclear agreement falls under this heading. This is sort of the political complex, right? The Trump administration's willingness to decertify that agreement makes absolutely no sense on a logical level because it's working. right? And everybody says it's working. The IEA says it's working. The Defense Department says it's working. Everybody says it's working, and it is working. And the only reason to decertify it is for political reasons. Does anybody feel safer knowing that we may be, I mean, even if the deal doesn't fall apart because it appears that all of the other European nations are going to continue to honor the agreement, all we're doing is taking the United States out. Are our interests advanced? Absolutely not. It's lunacy. But it's a payback to the, right, the United States ends up the isolated country. And if Iran wants, they're going to use this as an excuse to restart their nuclear programs, get the centrifuges spinning again. And the only reason it's being done, I think, is because Trump needs that fear. He needs to tell his base, you know, he spent the whole campaign saying, this is the worst agreement ever negotiated. Well, it's not the worst agreement ever negotiated. In fact, it's a pretty good one, and it was working. But for political reasons, he's going to do pretty serious damage, I think, to the American standing in the world because of it.
Well, I don't want to go back to Korea, but it is just relevant here.
Bring it.
Here's the thing. If you're Kim Jong-un, and
Right.
you're sitting there reading the newspaper, and you said, okay, they say they want to negotiate a deal with me. Why would you or anybody else negotiate a deal with the United States, given the fact that we want to walk away from one that is perfectly working? Here's the thing. This was not a friendship agreement with the Iranian government. This was a tightly bounded agreement to put on the shelf for a period of time their nuclear program. It is working. It's been deemed to be working by the IAEA and by everyone in the Trump administration. There are two things that come out in this. One is that people take some solace in having General Mattis and Kelly and Rex Tillerson in the White House. The fact is, Trump has rejected all of their counsel. So there's a little bit of a break in that warm, fuzzy feeling that comes from having adults around. The other one is that this is an agreement that is a benchmark or a kind of breakthrough agreement where we are sitting there with our allies, France, Germany, England, Russia, and China, that we're sitting on our side of the table. If we walk away from the agreement, which we can do, but let's face it, the negotiations that are going to take place inside the U.S. government are talking to ourselves. It has no impact on the other parties to the agreement, and it has no impact on Iran. The Iranians have already said, we got a deal. If you want to live up to it, that's okay. We're living up to the technical aspects of it. We're living up to every part of it. If you want to walk away from it, United States, go ahead. But as we said before, the United States will be the one that's isolated.
Yeah, and for those of you in Pat Tiberi's district, as I am, just yesterday or maybe 2 days ago on Facebook, he said he was thrilled that the president was doing this, and he was looking forward to undermining the agreement. I mean, that wasn't the phrase he used, but he was looking forward to putting new conditions in it to make it work. The idea that you're going to take, Iran had more than 20,000 centrifuges going in 2015. Now they've got less than 5,000, and then
They gave up 5 tons of plutonium and poured concrete.
right,
into their
and the ones that they're allowed to use are the IR-1 models, which are incredibly inefficient at creating these fissible materials. It's working. It's been certified by everybody, and yet we apparently are going to abandon it completely by ourselves for reasons of political gain.
Can I just say by way of background, and then countries, Iran in particular, they are allowed to have a nuclear research program. They just cannot have a program that is dedicated towards weapons development. And it was this negotiation with the United States, key allies, and China and Russia, right, all on the same side, plus Germany and the European Union, that came to a deal, right? Reducing centrifuges, reducing fissile material, and it's working.
pouring concrete into their reactor.
Yeah, and the point that the general made about the signal that this sends to North Korea needs to be underscored. 'Cause to them, it's like, is the United States a good faith negotiator in?
Well, not only to North Korea, but I think North Korea would be the most important one and the most urgent. But I think across the board, as we talk about the power of diplomacy, if this is allowed to run the most destructive course that it can in Trump's actions, it undermines U.S. credibility throughout the world.
Up here in the front, you had a question.
Where are the Republicans? Why aren't they stopping Trump? Why are they just being silent? Even the Democrats are not really doing much.
Well,
The question is, where are the Republicans at?
well, it's not only where the Republicans are, but it's where the Democrats are.
Yeah.
And there are very few who are really speaking up. But here's the thing. I was just in D.C. on Wednesday, and in an unrelated area. But one of the things that I heard repeatedly about this, and I've asked the question, as a matter of fact, I had a piece in the Columbus Dispatch a couple of weeks ago that talked about the absence of congressional voice in this. And the consensus among those on Capitol Hill is that if Trump starts a war and the war goes badly, we can criticize him and wipe our hands, wash our hands. If it goes well, we'll applaud him. But we don't want to take the responsibility. Now that's what I heard.
That's what they're there for.
I know. I got it.
I'm
I've written about Article 1, Section 8
Please
a
tell
number
ya.
of times. Here's the thing. When's the last time the United States declared war? We can't even get an authorization for the use of military force. We're operating in a number of countries, firing missiles all over the place, with an authorization for the use of military force that goes back to 9/11. Congress is derelict of duty. There's dereliction of duty among Congress. So that's the simplest way to answer your question. And I've said that to a number of congressmen, a number of sitting congressmen, who weren't very happy with my saying that, but I'm not running for election.
I think there was a gentleman there and then on the side.
I saw this morning on Meet the Press or one of those things that Nikki Haley was on. And she was talking about the Iran deal. And what she said is because of the nuclear deal, Iran has gotten a pass on everything else, on missiles and
Missiles, but
and
they were never part of the
That's not
deal.
part of the
What do
deal.
you guys think about that? I'm not saying
They're-
it's
they're-
right or wrong.
They were never part of the deal. The deal was constrained within the bounds of nuclear weapons development by Iran. It wasn't a friendship agreement. It wasn't a comprehensive agreement to keep them from supporting Hezbollah, to keep them from the Quds force or anything else. This is a myth that Trump and Nikki Haley and John Bolton and a bunch of other people are perpetrating that's confusing the issue.
And what she said was not that the deal was about anything but nuclear weapons, but it's not the only deal. You know, there's Iran has other
What's the
things
other
that
deal
we need
there?
to address independently or something.
Yeah. What's
And,
the other deal?
Right, so
No, that's not the only issue, is the nuclear weapons.
Okay.
And so somehow you have to address the other issues. That was her
But
point.
you don't have to destroy a deal that's working in the eyes of every party that's part of it in order to address the other issues.
Right? Diplomacy sometimes is the saying about learning to crawl before you can walk. The agreement that was made was limited and narrow, and it was specifically with regard to limiting the number of centrifuges, cutting off their high water reactors, disposing of most of their plutonium, enriched uranium. It was very specific, and they've lived up to all of that. Now, there are many who thought that could be built on, and we could develop that into getting them to limit some of their ballistic missile tests or other things. And at the moment, we haven't, but that's a whole separate concept. I'm a diplomatic historian. I can't think of another example in American history, and maybe there are some and I'm just not thinking of it, where an American government said, yes, you're adhering to the terms of this deal, but we don't think you're living up to the spirit of it, so we're going to cancel.
The spirit.
Right? I mean, that's crazy.
I read summaries of the entire pact, and I never saw the word spirit in there. I'd offer two other points too. If what the Trump administration is doing right now is undermining the long-term interests of the United States in Iran because it's reinforcing the hardliners who are against this deal to begin with within Iran, and it's reinforcing them. The other one is that I'd suggest to you is that we say that we can't trust the Iranians. Well, I'd ask for a show of hands in the room. of who can tell me what happened in Iran in 1953. Yeah. We undermined the Iranian government and installed the Shah and supported him, who ran the country for decades and was arguably more brutal than Saddam Hussein. And also in 1988, we blew a civilian airliner out of the air over the Persian Gulf that was in international airspace. So when we say that we can't trust them, we're not lily white by any stretch in our dealings with Iran.
Let me get to the woman on the side and then in the corner.
My boyfriend is a propaganda that comes from North Korea, and one of the reasons they're arguing that they need nuclear weapons is that it's an existential question that people don't want them to exist. But I'm sitting here going, doesn't everybody want them to exist? Because China definitely wants them to be there. And does the United States have any interest in taking Kim Jong-un out of power at all?
It would be great if Kim Jong-un wasn't in power and that he was replaced by somebody who wasn't such a horse's ass, to be undiplomatic for a minute. But that is the same thing as saying that there's an active plan or possibility of that occurring. There's no great threat to the Kim regime. If there is such a threat, it's an internal threat, and there isn't much of an internal threat at the moment either. China is actually quite frustrated with North Korea right now, but they don't want to undermine it either. This is much more about domestic needs for the Kim family. This is much more about rallying the people behind the Kim family. It's much more about having a justification for the domestic shortcomings. I'm sorry that you are all starving to death, but we need our money for nuclear weapons because otherwise the Americans are going to come in, and you remember what they did. And so it's much more about internal political needs than it is a real threat, even though that's the rhetoric they use. And for what it's worth, I work with a project in D.C. that since the end of the Cold War, we send people into the archives of the former communist bloc states, and we get their material related to North Korea. Because, I mean, who knows if there's North Korean records even out there, but we certainly don't have access to them. But we can get access to North Korean records by seeing what kind of communications they had with Poland and Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union. So we go in and we get those materials, and it's the same rhetoric back then. And in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, it was always the same. There's an impending American assault, so we need to rally the American people, build up our defense forces, and every time that the United States took action or matched them with rhetoric, just sort of played right into their hands because it gave them more ammunition for propaganda purposes.
In the back.
Having been in the service for many years, how can you say that the spirit or the intention of the inspections have been followed through on Iran? 95% of the sites have never been inspected. So how can you say that they've been compliant?
I don't say. The International Atomic Energy Agency says. The head foreign policy advisor for the European Union says. Iran has. They have agreed to every demand the IAEA has made, which includes, I think, 28 days' notice for them to inspect sites. There's also technical ways. There are signatures to plutonium and uranium that they test for. So while I don't have particular scientific background, I would say that when the world's experts are saying they're in compliance, and when even the American experts are saying they're in compliance,
You're still leaving out 95% of the sites that we've never seen or inspected.
Can you cite your sources?
I can't hear.
That they can inspect any site they want. The fact that the 90 haven't been inspected doesn't mean that there's something wrong, and there are other ways to find it out.
Can you ask them to speak?
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing.
Sorry,
There's a
guys, just if you stand up and just speak a little louder, because when you ask questions, so folks up here can ask. He was asking, how do we know that Iran is in compliance because 95% of the sites haven't been inspected? And then the question is, what's the source for that information? And the responses from the panel. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to debate whether every site has been inspected. The fact of the matter is that every responsible party that certifies the conditions being met in Iran under the agreement are satisfied that they're being met.
Secretary of Defense.
right. Also, I mean, I know there may be lots of other sites, but primarily Iran works on 3 sites, right? I mean, there's Natanz and Fordo, and then there's the one with the heavy water reactors where they have plutonium reprocessing. those are shut. They had underground programs going on, and we know for a fact that those are shut. Is it possible that they've moved something somewhere else? I suppose, but if you don't have the underground facilities, that's pretty hard to disguise. The IAEA has certified that they took 15,000 centrifuges and shut them down and locked them up. So if there is something going on, and I suppose there's always a possibility that they're cheating, but at the moment, there's no scientific expert that seems to think they are.
I'd like to just go back to what you had said earlier about the people in the government that are talking or doing diplomatic kind of talks with the North Koreans and things of that nature. In the Trump administration right now, there's a lot of positions that aren't filled.
Yeah.
I mean, my son works for the State Department. He develops plans for catastrophes and things like that for countries. He has plans on his desk that he can't give to nobody because there's nobody there that he can forward it to. So my question is that who are these people getting their information from that can say, okay, this is what we're going to do when there's nobody there that they can get it from or give it to inform the president that this is what you can do.
I think what Mitch was referring to is there are some back channel dialogue taking place that's not formal negotiations by people in the United States who are informed on this issue with say second or third level senior functionaries in the North Korean government, and that's healthy. But to your point, the State Department right now does not have an Assistant Secretary of State. Elliot Cohen, who was eminently qualified to be the Assistant Secretary of State, was chosen by Rex Tillerson. And just as an example, after Secretary Tillerson identified him as his choice to be his second in command, Elliot Cohen then had to go to New York and visit with President-elect Trump. I think he may have been president at the time. He may have already been confirmed. Trump said no. Tillerson did not support me, or Cohen did not support me during the campaign, so he rejected his choice. The fact is that there are approximately 590 positions in the executive branch of the government that require congressional or Senate confirmation. The last time I looked, there were just at 200 of them that had even been nominated. There are huge gaps in the government right now, not just in the State Department, but throughout the government, that's causing problems in not only domestically, but also in international relations across the board. And we had a situation even before Trump was elected, where 60 or 70 of the most respected conservative or Republican national security experts in the United States said that he was unfit to serve as President of the United States, Commander-in-Chief. Immediately, that precluded any of them from serving in a Trump administration. So you had a thing where the best qualified preempted their choice to serve, their selection to serve in the government, and we're seeing the consequences of that to this day.
Yeah, but you make a really good point, and it's one that concerns me as well. The inability, the unwillingness of the Trump administration to staff the government is going to have an impact on whatever these Track 2 negotiations put together anyway. Right? So as you say, there's hundreds of positions unfilled. As of 2 or 3 weeks ago, I saw that at this point, Trump has nominated fewer people than Obama or Bush had confirmed. But so the consequences for what you're talking about is right on point. I think that I know that these negotiations are going on, but then even if they are to make any sort of first step, the question is how do you get it implemented? And if we don't have trained officials in the State Department or whatever, in the intelligence community to implement it, it's a real hardship. So I am certainly optimistic by the knowledge that there are these talks going on, but I'm sure not as optimistic as I would be if the State Department was fully staffed.
How much is Putin influencing Trump's policies or lack of policies?
The question is, how much is Putin influencing Trump's policies or lack of policies?
It's hard to tell. I think that there was an expectation that investigations by Mueller did not take the course and the depth that they did, that there might be a closer link. But I think you've seen a distancing between the Trump administration and Putin. The bromance that was taking place during the early part of the administration and during the campaign has seemed to sour a bit. But let's face it, Putin is getting exactly what he wants. Putin is the relationship may be bad, but the Putin's objective is to discredit the United States, discredit democracy, Jeffersonian democracy, and drive a wedge between the United States and its allies and disrupt NATO, and all of these things are taking place. So, and oh, by the way, we have done nothing to have him give back Crimea, and he's still very disruptive in the Ukraine with his surrogates serving there. So I think Putin has been a big winner in this.
They're in the back in the corner. Yeah.
It seems that Mr. Trump has an awful lot of power for one man in our country. And we write letters, we send postcards, we make telephone calls, we protest, we march, we do all these things, and it seems like nothing is working. It's very frustrating. It feels almost futile. I'm going to continue to do it, but what more can we do? And we go out there, we vote, we support our candidates. What else can we do?
Well, the first thing is to talk to your Indivisible people here and coordinate your efforts with them. They are leading the resistance, and I applaud them for doing so. But God, I'm with you. I mean, I recognize some faces out there from when I gave a talk with Indivisible about healthcare and how much that meant to me. And you wouldn't believe how much I have spent over the last year fighting for healthcare. I've gone to D.C., I've gone to rallies, I've organized whatever. And the fact that just a few days ago he can sign an executive order that undoes like 50% of, I take some solace in the fact that there is a judiciary in this country, and they have stymied him on a number of fronts, and I hope that they will do so again. And I think that the most we can do is continue to keep the political pressure on. There are elections coming up, and although I don't know that I'm optimistic, I expect at least I don't know that we're optimistic that we're going to take things back and take control. I'm at least optimistic that a message can be sent, and that maybe that will convince some Republicans to show the backbone that I think we all want them to show.
Well, I think that it's not only Republicans, but I think Democrats have to speak out much more forcefully than they have to this point. Not necessarily with the impeachment, but with facts. I think Democrats have to ask much tougher questions of the administration than they're asking right now. I would love to see Democrats on the Foreign Affairs Committee or the House or Senate Armed Services Committee ask the administration if there was a kinetic war on the Korean Peninsula, what would it cost? How many people would die? We need to get questions like this out. The other thing is that I would suggest that these congressional elections, these midterm elections that are coming up right now, are so critical. There may be some seats that can't be overcome because of incumbency or gerrymandering. But I think that if there's not a challenge to Republicans who are intransigent in support of their support of Trump, that would be a travesty. The one other thing that gives me great hope and great solace is Bob Mueller, and I think that before it's all over, Mueller is going to expose some things that will put the brakes on much of the Trump administration's initiatives, and I'm looking forward to it. I think there have been some things already identified in the Mueller investigations that are very heartening to me. Even things like one thing that's near and dear to my heart is security clearances. How did Jared Kushner, first of all, get a security clearance, and secondly, how does he keep it? He has made 3 or 4 corrections or amplifications to his initial. You don't do that. You don't do that. I have seen field grade officers in the military basically lose their careers because of not handling classified information appropriately. How this guy keeps his security clearance is beyond me. But we have, I am very, very hopeful that Bob Mueller will be a source of breaks on the Trump administration and the abuses.
Can I add my 2 cents here? I think it's
Yes.
a wonderful question. I think a lot of people share that frustration. One thing I would add is that continue to have conversations with people in the district and people in Ohio, because it's such a, can go either way. Have conversations and try to have them, as difficult as it is, without going from 0 to super emotional, angry. I think that it's hard. It's a learned conversation to talk about politics in the age of Trump. But being able to make a human connection with someone, it's one thing to, get on Twitter and Facebook, but when you have a face-to-face conversation with someone, they can see that you care, and you can see that they care, and hopefully as you mobilize some facts of the matter, because at the end of the day, a lot of this comes down to what is good policy and what is bad policy, and we should be able to find some common ground there through, democratic discourse. So that would be my 2 cents there. Up here in the front.
What would happen if Trump demanded that our country drop nuclear bombs on North Korea?
The question is, what would happen if Trump decided we need to drop a nuclear bomb in North Korea?
I would, this is a very, very disconcerting question. I was almost hoping that no one would ask it, because if you haven't felt uncomfortable to this point in the meeting, the fact of the matter is that there is no check on the chief executive's ability or right or responsibility to detonate nuclear weapons against the threat that he sees. He has a direct line to a 4-star Navy admiral right now who is sworn to execute that order. There is no intercession by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. There is no required intercession by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Senate Armed Services Committee, or anything else. And part of that is because in most cases, in the event of a nuclear attack on the United States, there's a very short period of time in which the chief executive, the commander-in-chief in this case, needs to make that decision to detonate nuclear weapons. So it's a comprehensive responsibility that he has that is more relevant in light of as I've described him, an inexperienced sociopath with a nuclear weapon than it was when we had people like George H.W. Bush, Bush 41, or even Bush 43. These kinds of questions were never as urgent as they are now, but that's the rationale and that's the answer to your question. Not very comforting, is it?
He can launch a preemptive strike.
Pardon me?
He can launch a preemptive strike.
Theoretically, yes.
And even there's not a missile coming towards us.
That's correct.
Gentlemen in the center.
I have hopes that that 4-star Navy admiral might recognize an unlawful order, because General, I used to be a subordinate commander here. We were trained to recognize unlawful orders. And I would hope that that 4-star would recognize such an order as an unlawful order.
I share your hope, but the fact of the matter is that he is sworn by an oath to obey the order.
That's true.
But there are rumors, right? There are rumors that various steps have been put in place and that different Defense Department officials have had sort of a whispering campaign that if he does unleash that order, maybe it shouldn't be applied and maybe somebody needs to intercede. Now, I don't know if the timing would allow for that. But
it's happened before. In 1983, there was a famous exercise, NATO exercise called Able Archer, and a subordinate Russian decided not to launch. Yeah. And it's happened before. That precedent has been before. Yeah. So I'm hopeful that more sound minds would intercede in that scenario.
From your lips to God's ears.
Yes.
We have time for one more, and I just want to see if there are any hands that that's a lot. I haven't had any repeats. All right, Dan.
So I came a little late, and if you started with this, then just tell me I'll find out later. But in this, part of the craziness, all of a sudden, I don't understand where this, spotlight was thrown into North Korea that we have ended up in this situation? Was there something that was coming up and responded, or did Trump just pick it out of his hat and start going off on it?
Well, this is a threat that's been building for 4 or 5 administrations, and now some advancements that the North Koreans have made in some accelerated testing of nuclear weapons and missiles has cast that spotlight a little brighter. But this is not a new issue. It's been accelerated by testing and development on the part of the North Koreans.
All right. You wanna-
Right, sure.
Here?
Thank you for that. And thank you for your questions. Don't leave yet. I just want to talk to you for a couple of minutes, and then if you have other questions, I'm sure our panelists will stay around and answer questions to you. Is there anybody who didn't get a program? Okay, great. And if folks came at the end, if you can come up afterwards and sign in, that would be awesome. And I just want to talk to you for just a couple minutes about things that you can do. Because it's true, it is really frustrating. But here we have a piece of information that, Pat Tiberi came out and said he was so excited that the president is decertifying the Iran deal. Well, every single one of us needs to go home that is in District 12, who lives in District 12, and write to Pat Tiberi or call him or fax him or email him and tell him that we're horrified by that and give some reasons why. We need to be in touch with our Congress people, our members of Congress, our senators, even Senator Brown. We've heard tonight, you need to be asking some more pointed, factual, hard-hitting questions. Senator Brown needs to step up and ask those. And we need to indicate we're not just concerned about health care. Everyone was concerned about health care because it affects us, we feel it directly. But we're also concerned about these foreign policy issues that are, tremendously important to us. So I just want you to look on the inside of your program. And you have some ideas of things to discuss with your congressman, but many other ideas I'm sure you thought of or heard this evening. And then you have all the contact information on this side for your members of Congress, whether you're in District 3, District 12, or District 15, including your senators. And you don't have to be an expert, to say that the experts have determined that Iran is in compliance, the agreement is working, this is not a good example for North Korea. All the things that we learned tonight, you can mention. And I just think it's important that they aren't given a free pass. If they don't hear from us, they're given a free pass to say, well, my constituents support this. And we have to show them that isn't true. And increasingly as we get towards the election, even people like Pat Tiberi have to show some distance from Trump. And you will notice that he is showing a little bit more distance from Trump. He just voted to support aid to Puerto Rico, which some Republican congressmen didn't do, and he just joined an environmental, sustainable climate action committee. He's kind of edging his way towards some things that maybe we consider like a little bit more rational. And we need to thank him when he does those things, and we need to tell him we disagree when he does things that we don't agree with, and we need to just be in contact. And there are so many ways to do that, as we all know. You can email, you can fax, you can resist bot, etc. And a new thing that we have just joined as a group, Indivisible, is Amplify, which you probably got a flyer about. If you didn't, I can give you one later. And there's a call to action on our Facebook page every day. You can also get it by email. But this is an app for your phone. And I get it. There's lots and lots of ways of doing this. But what we're looking to do is try to find a way that's maybe a little bit more social, even though you're doing it by yourself. So we're encouraging people. We're just kind of testing it out. So I thought I would test it out with this group and a few other people, where you download the app, and then our code is on this flyer. You enter the flyer, and then you get, once a week, you get notifications about calls to make to your congressman. And all you have to do is click on it and it makes the call, and then you, after you've made the call, you say whether you reached someone, you spoke to someone, or you left a voicemail. And then that kind of shows up on a little list, and you can see that other people in the team who did stuff, and you can kind of say, hey, good job, you called T-Berry today, way to go. And it counts how many times you called, so it'll say like, hey, you did 5 actions this week, way to go, you get 5 stars. It's just like a way to kind of keep track of what you're doing, so we know how many people are making calls, we know how many people made calls about different actions. You can encourage each other, you can kind of go for a goal. And these are national Indivisible calls, and we can also enter our own calls to action. We can do Ohio-specific ones. We can do T-Berry-specific ones. But even if you're not in T-Berry's district, if you join, and you put in your zip code, it'll give you information for your congressman. So you don't have to be in T-Berry's district. So, it's just another way to try to encourage yourself, to prod yourself a little bit. And these notifications will only come once a week. So it's not going to be like, overwhelming. But it's just a list you can go to and say, oh, I made a couple calls yesterday. I think I'll make a couple calls today. And then you can go to your list and they're there. So that's just, one idea of something to do. And then on the back of your program, it has some ways to get involved with Indivisible District 12. Sign up for our newsletter. I mean, if you signed in tonight and you gave your email, then you hopefully will get our newsletter, which again just comes out about once a week. You can sign up for the calls to action by email. We go to T-Berry's office every Thursday at noon. Raise your hand if you've been to a T-Berry action. So you can see we have some hardcore folks here who've been going. How many weeks have we been going? 37 so far. 38 is going to be next week. So 40 is on November 2nd. Yeah. And we want November 2nd to be a big one. And so we're really encouraging a lot of folks to come out. It's noon on Thursdays. And we are starting to have better, more meaningful conversations with the staff members. We are requesting meetings. We're kind of trying to track things. We're requesting meetings of the congressman. We're submitting letters that we're asking for him to respond to because, it's very easy for them to not respond to us. So we need to call attention to the fact that we're there and that we're asking. We really just encourage each and every one of you to write a letter to the editor, to have an awkward conversation with a neighbor that you don't really usually talk to. You can say, hey, I went to this talk last night and I learned these things about North Korea that, and about the Iran, agreement that were really shocking. And I don't know if you've heard about this information, and spread the word to people because it's just, even though we're all horrified, it's so difficult to keep active, and it's so difficult to reach out to other people and expand the circle of people who are taking action. So we welcome you to get involved with Indivisible District 12. Come join our leadership team. We post all that information about when we meet. We also, this is the most important piece of information, nobody needs permission to do an action, to plan an action, to take action, to join together with friends, to post something on our Facebook. It's not a moderated group. You can come up with an idea. Let's have a trip to Washington and go meet Pat T-Berry. Let's, take turns writing letters to the editors. So we have one person every day submits a letter. Whatever you choose to do, you don't need permission to do it. Do it. We want you to do it. So, and if there's things that you're particularly interested in, if you want to see us put on another event like this, or you are interested in putting on another event like this, let us know. We want to learn more from the people in our district who are experts and who have are resources for us, and we appreciate them coming out and giving us their time. So, yes.
I'm in District 4.
4, okay.
Yeah, from Marysville. And I was wondering if we could get people, you guys in particular, to have a panel discussion with people from Union County, maybe even include Delaware.
Let's talk about that. That sounds like a great idea.
Can I
Yes,
just
please.
point out one thing? I think that me as urging everyone to get involved and to speak up and to address decision makers and your congressmen and their staffs are critically important. But I would just suggest one thing. My experience in this is that emotional pleas or screams or howls don't really win the day. Fact-based arguments that are researched and sound and have been tested have resonance, and they can sometimes win the day. But if you choose to do that, pick a slice, pick a topic, pick an item, get yourself educated on it, be an expert on it, and be willing to engage in a fact-based dialogue that will win the day.
And of course, what the Major General said, we have to elect better people. And so that is kind of phase 2. We have to get to the point where we are electing better people. And that means everybody's got to have signed that anti-gerrymandering. We need to get rid of gerrymandering in Ohio. We need to elect better people. And that's just going to require all of us to keep pushing and keep talking about it. We can hook you up with petitions. We can train you. You can get out there.